Hey, everybody. Today we have a True Crime Digest episode. So we're going to be covering case updates for Sam Nordquist, Mercedes Vega, and the disappearance of Daniel Robinson. Hi, welcome to True Creeps, where the stories are true and the creeps are real. We'll cover stories from grotesque gore to the possibly plausible paranormal, to horrifying history, to tense and terrible true crime, and everything else that goes bump in the night. We're your hosts, Amanda, and I'm Lindsay, and we want you to join us while we creep. We cover mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody, welcome to our 22nd True Crime Digest. If you are unfamiliar with what these are, this is where we basically share case updates for cases that we've covered in the past. All of the cases that we're going to cover today, we have full-length episodes on, and we've covered most of them in our True Crime Digest updates before. We're really happy for the movement in a few of these.
I'm just going to make a little note here, just in case. I have bonus kids today, and they're shrieking, and I'm so sorry.
Our first update for today is for Daniel Robinson. We have a full-length episode on him that came out in 2022. If you're new to listening, take a little scroll back if you haven't gone back that far yet. His case is incredibly interesting, and he is still missing.
It's heartbreaking it's been that long.
It is heartbreaking, devastating, and just, I feel like, relentlessly tiring because my heart hurts so much for his father, who has never stopped looking for his son. And just as the briefest recap, Daniel Robinson went missing when he was 24 years old, and he was a geologist. He left his work site at Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road in Arizona on June 23rd and has been missing since. A month later, his Jeep was found, but he is still missing. His father has been the person who has been pushing for his search. The Buckeye Police Department has pretty much dropped the ball, fumbled the ball, sports metaphors all the way around for doing a terrible job. They have done the bare minimum at every turn. It's taken a lot of effort from his father to keep Daniel's case present so that people are still looking and being aware. And as part of that, America's Most Wanted has a missing persons show. From my understanding, it's still pretty new. I think there's only a couple episodes that are out. I think there's only 3. It's on Hulu. What an interesting panel of hosts it has.
But I loved it.
I was so surprised, but I also did really like it. They have Elizabeth Smart, which she herself was a missing child. She's obviously an advocate for families and victims. There's also Payne Lindsay, who is a true crime podcaster. In his podcast, he even talked about Daniel. There's also an investigator who typically works with America's Most Wanted. And then there's a retired police officer as well. I'm not going to get into all of their names, but I just want to point out that they have got a very interesting panel of people who are kind of looking at the case and chatting about it. Payne Lindsay actually talks to Daniel's father, David, and they went to Arizona. They shot footage. They looked at some more stuff that we'll talk about in a second, but just a really interesting refresher on the case for anybody who doesn't really know all the ins and outs of it. We didn't learn anything new from the episode, but they did talk about some of the worrisome facts about the case that make it so concerning because the Buckeye Police Department is not treating this like a criminal investigation anymore. Part of what I think the purpose of his particular segment in the episode is to say, let us just give you 10, 15 minutes of facts to prove that something is wrong. This doesn't seem like somebody just went randomly missing in the desert. This seems like there was foul play.
It's so obvious. Like it hurts.
Yes. It's so obvious that it makes you wonder, why would you give up so easily? Why would you think that this wasn't foul play? You can't look at these facts and think, oh, this is normal.
Right.
So let's get into some of those interesting case facts. They went through the timeline in the America's Most Wanted episode, and the inconsistency is specifically with his Jeep at first. When the Jeep was found, a month later, it was found by a cattle rancher who was 100% sure that Jeep had not been there long. We talked about it when we originally found out, but the rancher was like, this hasn't been here. And you know that because one, he's in that area, but also because the cattle would have fucked with it if it had been.
Yeah.
Because they would have been licking it and running amok. I didn't know that cattle were just so sassy, but he was like, this is cowboy knowledge. The cows would have fucked with it, but also the Jeep itself had some strange things going on. The black box from inside the Jeep showed that after the airbags had been deployed, it was driven 11 miles after that because it shows the mileage of when the airbags deployed versus the final mileage of the vehicle. the crash damage on the vehicle is inconsistent with the ravine that it was found in. So there was damage to the windshield that didn't make sense. And I want to think that there was some scuffs on the body of the Jeep itself that just didn't match where it was. It also showed that after the airbags had been deployed, someone tried to start it over 40 times. When you look at pictures of how the Jeep is positioned in this ravine, it's on its side. You would not try to start your car over 40 times if it was sideways. The only time I could think that is if you were like trapped inside with the window up and you were trying to get the windows down. But like at that point, you just kick it out if you need to get out. A strange fact nonetheless. So for a very brief time, the Buckeye Police Department did assist with Daniel's case, and they were looking at it as a perhaps criminal investigation. But then in May 2023, they concluded that his disappearance was no longer a criminal investigation. And at that point, they returned all the evidence that they had collected and all of Daniel's effects to David. In the America's Most Wanted episode, they show Payne Lindsay with David at the storage locker where David keeps everything. One of the things that I found really jarring was that everything was still in the evidence bags,
with the tape still adhered.
I am fortunate enough that I have never had somebody who I love go missing. That in and of itself is incredibly traumatic. Knowing that the police are closing the case is incredibly traumatic, sad, and heartbreaking. I can't imagine someone who I love getting all of their things back in these bags and how that would feel, especially knowing that once that comes back to you, they can't use that as evidence in the case because the chain of custody has been broken. They can't test it. And when you're thinking of like DNA testing and things like that, typically both the prosecution and the defense in a given case will want to be able to test the evidence or at least have access to like all of the records. But most of the time, both need to be able to have the actual source evidence, and it has to have had the same chain of custody. So now, if they ever did find someone who they thought was responsible, and they did find some type of evidence that would match them there, they couldn't use any of these effects in the actual case. So even if they found somebody they thought was criminally culpable, Daniel might not get justice if something did happen to him.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that with other cases too, where we're like, the family's upset that they didn't get the belongings back. And we've discussed like, well, it's for their benefit. It sucks, but like it's for their benefit later.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's the total opposite. They're like, here, take the stuff. We're done.
Which so soon, so soon. One of the pieces of evidence that they talked about in the episode that we've talked about before was Daniel's computer, which the digital forensics team for Buckeye determined that the computer had been accessed after Daniel had disappeared. It's just another strange fact, right? So the car is moved from the original crash site. It's in a place where it hadn't been days, weeks earlier.
Right.
His computer's been accessed.
Yeah, the computer was at home. So it's not like it was like a laptop in the car with him. It was at home.
It's considerably further away. When they're showing all of the kind of like evidence bags and stuff like that, one of the things that David pulls out is a black trash bag that is tied off. Presumably, these are some of Daniel's like personal effects that really weren't part of evidence. They were just collected because they were on the scene and such. And Payne Lindsay asks, oh, hey, can we look at them? And David's like, I'm not ready yet. It's just so heartbreaking that he has to experience this on top of everything else, right? Like a lot of people, when they lose someone or someone goes missing, their personal effects are a comfort. It's like this is something that they held. But when it's part of a crime scene, it becomes something completely different, right? It's not a shirt that smells like them. It's the shirt they were wearing when they went missing.
Yeah. And he had all of his apartment stuff, it looked like, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, like, what do you do when someone disappears and they have a whole apartment or house full of stuff?
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking that he's like, well, I need to keep it. There's a possibility he could come back. Oh, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. Now, during the search for Daniel, David has been the one running, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Organizing everything.
Mm-hmm. 5 sets of human remains have been found. Obviously not Daniel's, but 5 sets. In the America's Most Wanted episode, they say it, but we've seen it time and time again, that's perhaps evidence that there is something going on in this area. Most places don't have 5 sets of human remains. It's obviously a large geographic area.
Yeah, it's the desert, like middle of the desert.
But still, I just feel like a general 100 square miles from a certain point, unless there's a cemetery around, I'm not expecting to find any sets of human remains, let alone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a missing person. That's too many to be a coincidence.
Yeah, in a specific area of the desert. Yeah. Ugh. Just the fact that these people too that he's finding. Why weren't they
Mhm.
found before? I mean, I haven't seen any of their stories posted or anything like that yet. But also, where did they come from? And who are they? And why are they all in the same area?
Exactly. Now, we've mentioned quite a few times that David has worked tirelessly for his son. He has a website. It's pleasehelpfinddaniel.com. We'll link it in the show notes, as we always do. If you go there, you can see information about the case as well as ways to help. We're recording this on January 15th, which is the day after Daniel's birthday. David's website hosted a stream where other families with missing loved ones could share stories about them.
Yeah, he's a big advocate.
He is. And so pleasehelpfinddaniel.com now also features other missing persons, along with ways that you can be part of mail-in protests by sending flyers to the Buckeye Police Department and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
There's a lot going on. I had never even heard of a mail-in protest,
I hadn't either.
but I'm sure they're getting these all the time, and they have to see Daniel's name every time one of those is sent. Interesting, too, that everyone can send these in. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
worldwide can be sending these.
Yep. And you can send more than one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's your new hobby. You print off a bunch, you put them in envelopes, and once a week you send one, just over and over again.
So, glad that he's still doing it, but it breaks my heart.
It's fascinating how creative families have to get so that their loved ones don't get forgotten, especially by law enforcement. We're also going to talk about another case right before Valentine's Day where a family member is keeping their loved one's name with police in it. Just an interesting way that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah. The next case that we're going to talk about is the case for Mercedes Vega. And this is another local one for me. But with this being local, I do see a lot of small updates as well. But we're going to focus on some of the bigger things happening. As a quick recap, Mercedes Vega was abducted from her Tempe, Arizona apartment around 9 p.m. on the evening of Sunday, April 16th of 2023. That same evening, only a few hours later, she was found deceased in a Chevy Malibu that was set on fire in Tonopah, Arizona. According to the medical examiner's report, Mercedes was shot in the arm, hit in the head, had bleach in her throat, and eventually died of smoke inhalation while being burned alive in the car. We have a full episode with all of the timeline of everything that happened. We've also covered case updates in our other true crime digests, but we have a couple, I guess I would say big ones since last time we talked about it.
Yeah. Again, when we do our True Crime Digest updates, we don't have a very long recap. Her case is heartbreaking. And it was another example of her family really having to push for work to get done here. It was awful. What happened to her and what she had to experience was truly awful. It hurts my heart that her parents had to push so hard for it to be taken seriously, especially with something as unmistakably violent. And it was just perplexing how it wouldn't be like your number one fucking priority in the world to find the people who did this particular heinous action.
Yeah, you would think that they'd be like, how do we get all of these people off the streets immediately? And I understand that there's things, you have to go through step 1, 2, and 3 and so on. But it just, you're letting these people out for so long to potentially do this again to someone.
Exactly.
But anyways, for the updates, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office announced that they are seeking the death penalty against Sincere Hayes and Cujo Young. Jared Gray was arrested in relation to Mercedes' murder as well. There was a delay in his arrest because he was being held in Georgia for an unrelated violation of his probation. He was recently extradited to Arizona. So now we have all 3 of them. They're all here in Arizona waiting for what comes next, right? We don't know whether the Maricopa County Attorney's Office will be pursuing the death penalty against Gray as well. As of right now, it hasn't been reported on. Some are speculating now that perhaps there is some sort of agreement with him to take that off the table. We don't know yet. Time will tell.
It's also worth mentioning that the notice of intent to seek the death penalty was filed in December after charges had been filed months and months and months before, whereas Gray was just indicted. So it's not altogether surprising that they wouldn't have that paperwork filed already.
In other cases, we've been able to review the indictment, but the grand jury indictment in this case was sealed in late December of 2025, so last month. Hayes and Young also tried to have their cases severed, but the court denied the request, which means that they would be tried separately had they approved it. I've seen a few things on that, and one being like how insanely expensive it would be to try everyone separately too. Could be a number of reasons.
Especially when you know that you have 2, now 3. That would be the
Mhm.
same trial 3 times.
Exactly.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
it is. And as a reminder, Mercedes was scheduled to testify against Cujo Young and was killed right before it. He allegedly robbed her at gunpoint, and she was scheduled to finally testify for the robbery case. And interestingly, he still has not gone to trial for the armed robbery case. It's been delayed 19 times. They tried for a 20th, and luckily that was denied. So this goes way before she was murdered into another horrific thing that she had to experience. As of now, the trial for the armed robbery case should begin next month in February of 2026. Hopefully, it's not delayed again. Erica Pillsbury, who's Mercedes' mom, is active on social media and continues to share her story. So she does lives and TikToks and talks about the case, and recently even like ways to be safe in Tempe or wherever you are. So she's doing a lot. But what she was talking about in this TikTok is when Mercedes was robbed at gunpoint in October of 2020, Erica went and picked her up from that apartment, brought her and her dog home with her. She, I guess, stayed there, cleaned the apartment, got it ready because Mercedes was not going back there. It just kind of broke my heart that where Mercedes was abducted, I guess the way that I interpreted it is that they assured her that this apartment was going to be safe because it had security, like key fobs and gates and things like that. So like she did the extra steps to keep her daughter safe, and it still wasn't enough. And that just broke me listening to her talk about it. The day before Mercedes was supposed to go to court and testify, that's when she was attacked.
That doesn't sound like a coincidence.
Yeah, the day before is insane.
Yeah.
And there are a few more explained details that have happened since last time we've discussed her case. And Erica, interestingly, shared a YouTube video from Law and Crime that reviewed a few things, and they interviewed her too. The reason why, allegedly, Cujo had the 2 other men commit this horrible crime is because he was out on bond for the robbery. He was wearing a GPS monitor, so he couldn't take part in it. He had to have someone else do it because then they know exactly where he was. And then when authorities traced a phone back to the plane tickets that were purchased for the other 2 to come to Arizona, that same phone number traced to the area where Mercedes was found that evening, allegedly. Maricopa County investigators reportedly talked to a man whose cell phone location was near the scene as well. And this unnamed man told investigators that Young called him to pick up a package, which ended up being the other 2 men. So I know Lindsay and I had talked about it at the beginning. We're like, how were they in this car with her, torturing her in the middle of the desert on a freeway? And then just they're gone. Like they were able to leave her body in this car and be gone. And this is perhaps how it happened. So he supposedly, this guy was given a location and a car, and he went and picked up this package of 2 men and returned them to the Phoenix area. So that kind of answered one question that we were wondering. There's more people involved.
I just find this all so perplexing because why would you do that for someone?
Right. And like, was this person present as they were lighting the car on fire? Like, did he show up before that? Like, I have so many questions for this.
Yeah.
The phones belonging to this individual and Hayes allegedly show them on the I-10 in the hours after her death. The day after she was killed, Hayes and Gray allegedly took a Greyhound bus back to Tennessee. So again, this is in an interview that Erica had shared. I'm very interested in more details as this progresses. And Erica had just shared too, I believe it's tomorrow, the 16th, that there's a hearing for 2 of them. So hopefully, like, now that it's rolling and that the robbery trial is going to take place, hopefully, like, we can get this done too, because I know her parents are just done. Like, they need justice and they need it yesterday.
We know from other cases that we've covered that when someone is sentenced to the death penalty and they later find that there's other charges against them, whether or not those crimes happened before or after the crime that got them sentenced to death, sometimes prosecutors elect to not prosecute because it is expensive to have a trial. If the end result is that person is either going to be sentenced to death or prison time, the result is the same as if the case was never tried. So it's possible, if there's a speedy trial waiver, it's completely possible that that case is stalled until after this one. If they are unsuccessful in the murder trial, they could then get him for armed robbery. They could also elect to change that armed robbery to attempted murder, depending on how this case goes.
Yeah.
I could see why they might be stalled for a whole number of reasons.
Erica is pretty active, I would say, on the Justice for Mercedes Mariana Vega Facebook group. So if you guys want to keep up to date with what's going on with some more, I guess, inside knowledge coming from her mom, I feel like that's a great place to get some information. Also, what she recently did with a group of loved ones and supporters is she placed a cross at milepost 85 on New Year's Eve for Mercedes. So now on the side of the road where she was found, there's, something for Mercedes, which I always thought about, like, where do those come from? I figured the families did it, but I guess you have to get it like approved and stuff. So she did that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like extra work that like she shouldn't have to do anything like this. It's crazy.
Agreed. I also think the work of honoring your loved one is sometimes cathartic.
Yeah, way to grieve.
Like if you're planning a funeral and things like that, or, something like this, it's like the part of you that is grieving and it's like with love versus like seeking, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I am honoring you as you are and you were, not seeking justice. Like you can grieve in lots of different ways, but like, even if you're thinking of like non-violent deaths, like planning a funeral or cremation or those types of things, like, it's often a way of grieving in action and being able to move and do something, not just sit.
I like that she was able to do it. And before she was promising Mercedes we're going to get justice. And now she's like, they're behind bars. Like it started. She, I guess, could feel accomplished for that, which is great. We'll be keeping an eye on this. Lindsay and I were looking at the court case website and there's hearings forever scheduled already. So we'll keep an eye on those.
Yes. So our last case that we're going to update on pertains to the torture of Sam Nordquist and his subsequent murder. We originally covered this case last year. So we're going to start with a recap of what happened, and then we're going to go into all the updates that we have for today. This is our longest update because we learned a good bit of information since we last covered Sam. So let's get into that recap. In September of 2024, Sam Nordquist traveled to New York from Oakdale, Minnesota to spend time with his girlfriend, Precious Arzuaga, who he had met online. But it is important to note that Sam was a Black trans man. And when this case originally came out, one of the things that people were concerned about was whether this would be considered a hate crime. We covered in our original case why this was not, because it seems as though what they did to Sam didn't have anything to do with his gender identity. The prosecuting attorneys in this case have said that the charges against the defendants, who we'll talk about in a moment, are more severe than hate crime offenses. That's how they describe it. I say that now just to make sure that we've mentioned it because it is an important fact. And as we talk about what happened to Sam and how he's honored later on in the episode, you have the context of why he is considered part of the LGBTQIA+ community. Also, just in case you didn't know, victims and people who are not deemed culpable in some way to us, we say their first name. People who are either perpetrators, assailants, or we are deeming culpable in some way will often say their last name. So if you're wondering why we're bouncing back and forth between a first and last name, that's why. So Sam is in New York with Arzuaga. As time went on, Sam's family heard from him less and less, which was quite bizarre. He was very close with them. The Ontario County Department of Social Services reached out to Sam's mom, Linda Nordquist, because Sam was seeking their help in leaving Arzuaga in December of 2024. Fast forward to the 1st of January of 2025. It's the last time that Linda speaks with her son on the phone. From then on, they get texts from him throughout the end of January, but they don't really sound like him. Sam was super close with his sister Kayla as well. He was a proud uncle to his nieces and nephews. Kayla sent him a photo of his nieces and nephews and didn't get a response. And that it hit Kayla, right? She was like, something's wrong. So she talked to her mom and they decided to call law enforcement to see if they do a wellness check on Sam. We get more into the specifics of all of the things that happened between when Sam got to New York and this final wellness check in our full-length episode. So definitely, if you haven't listened to that already, please go and listen to it because I think it is really important context. At this final wellness check, the police go to Patty's Lodge where he was living with Arzuaga, and they can't find him. They report this back to Kayla and Linda, and they file a missing persons report on that same day. As one would imagine, when you have a job and responsibilities, you can't just pick up and leave in an instant. So Sam's family was working to be able to get to New York to help search for him because there was lots of people looking for Sam. And unfortunately, they found Sam's remains on February 13th of 2025. We later find out in the felony complaint against the 7 defendants that Sam had been mentally, physically, and sexually tortured from January 1st to February 2nd of 2025. And to make matters even worse, 2 children were coerced into participating in the abuse and were present for the abuse otherwise. Those charged with the torture and murder of Sam were, as we mentioned a moment ago, Precious Arzuaga, Jennifer Keano, Kyle Sage, Patrick Goodwin, Thomas Eves, and that is Arzuaga's adult son, Kimberly Sochia, and Emily Moidka. In our original update, we gave some context about these defendants, but more has come to light about Arzuaga and Quijano, so we're going to share that with you. Just as a trigger warning, we are going to be talking about domestic violence today, so if that's something that you might find triggering, take a look at the show notes. We'll tell you where to fast forward to if you want to skip this part. Just know that we are going to talk about Arzuaga's history of domestic violence against her partners, as well as violence against children.
So first we're going to talk about Arzuaga. Syracuse.com did lots of interviews with people who have known Arzuaga over the years. We've talked about her violent past in our initial episode on Sam's torture and murder, but it's so much more than we knew. They found that there are over 300 police reports about Arzuaga.
That's wild.
That's so many.
That's so many.
Arzuaga's mother has called the police on her because Arzuaga had threatened to have someone beat up her own son. That's another level.
It's another level.
There are also several reports of her using drugs in front of her children. One longtime friend of Arzuaga, Danielle Bourne, said that her friendship with her began to deteriorate after she witnessed Arzuaga dragging her daughter around by her hair. It breaks my heart for these kids that went through all of this too. And like, how many police reports does it take?
Yeah.
At what point? Arzuaga then asked the girl if she liked how that felt. Danielle recorded Arzuaga and turned the footage over to Child Protective Services. Arzuaga then lost custody of her 2 children, but it seems like that was temporary because she had them again at some point. Some people who knew her when she was younger said that while she was in elementary school, she would torture other children. Additionally, she was known to beat up younger children on the playground. Arzuaga allegedly tried to convince 2 younger girls to kill themselves. The mother of one of the girls shared this with Syracuse.com.
Woof.
That's a long history of just bad, scary behavior.
And it continues to get worse.
Yeah. Syracuse.com spoke with Carlos Oritz Rivera, and he is said to have an on and off again relationship with Arzuaga about 8 years ago. At one point, Carlos ended the relationship with her and told her that he was leaving. Carlos said Arzuaga then stabbed him in the hand with a sword. What the fuck?
A sword.
A sword.
Being stabbed is not good, but the idea of being stabbed with a sword, I don't even know how I would process that. That's just bad through and through, because that's a large weapon.
She begged him not to call the police. You got stabbed with a sword.
If you stab me, I will call the police.
Carlos also said that she attempted to run him over in the parking lot of Patty's Lodge after they had broken up. So not only stabbing him, but trying to run him over. Their infant son was in the car when she tried to do this. Syracuse.com also spoke with Felicia Robbins, and they had a relationship with Arzuaga about 5 years ago. They met because they both lived on the same street when they were growing up, and the two ran into one another after Felicia had gotten out of rehab. Arzuaga would leave her children with her for hours and take Felicia's car.
And it really seemed as though Felicia felt like she was being used. She also even said that she thought that she had another girlfriend somewhere, and that's why she would take her car and not tell her where she went.
Arzuaga wanted Felicia to live with her, but Felicia resisted. And she recounted that the only running water in Arzuaga's trailer was in the bathtub and that there was trash everywhere. So, I mean, fair not to want to move in with that person, right?
Especially if you feel like that person is using you for free childcare and taking your vehicle.
And cheating on you and
all good reasons to not want to live with that person.
Fair. So, to make matters worse, Felicia tried to end the relationship, and in return, Arzuaga choked her. So it seems like there's a pattern here, right? Like, if anyone breaks up with her, there's violence. The final time Felicia broke up with Arzuaga, she choked her hard enough to leave bruises where her fingers had gripped Felicia's neck. Arzuaga did not stop trying to hurt Felicia once their relationship ended. So it's not like you stop it and, okay, now you're free. It's she's going to continue after you. At one point, Arzwaga texted Felicia's fiance and said that they were having sex. And another time, she left Felicia's fiance a threatening voicemail.
So she just kept trying to mess with her life. If she couldn't physically hurt her, she wanted to emotionally hurt her.
Exactly. Talking about Sam, too, Sam wanted to break up with her. And so you see this pattern, unfortunately.
Yes. Des Tucker also spoke with Syracuse.com, and they were with Arzwaga about 3 years ago. During a live stream, Arzwaga beat Des. Des also had an audio recording that she shared with Syracuse.com, where in the recording, Arzwaga is screaming at Des and talking about beating Des because Des threatened to call the police because Arzwaga hurt her. So she's like, you want to call the police because I'll hurt you? I'm going to hurt you again.
Horrific.
Per Syracuse.com, in the recording, Arzwaga says, I'd still put my hands on you when you're on the phone with 911. That's what I did to Brooklyn. You think you're special? And as a note, Brooklyn is Jennifer Quijano. Brooklyn's the nickname that she goes by. She is another defendant in the case for the torture and murder of Sam. We're also going to talk about some more things going on with her that we learned as well in this kind of section of the episode. But getting back to that recording, so there's this recording where Arzwaga is talking about hurting Des, right? And threatening her. And in the middle of it, Arzwaga's daughter comes up and is like, hey, where's the scotch tape? Completely unbothered by the scene that is unfolding. Like, she seems just completely unfazed by it, which is a testament to the violence that she was likely surrounded by growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Des also shared another audio recording where Arzwaga was bragging to people that she was able to convince Child Protective Services to let her keep her children, even though they were called out to her home 45 times in just 2 months.
That pisses me off so much.
That makes me so angry. I don't understand that at all.
No. It hurts my heart for how many kids have gone through this or are going through this right now.
Yes, it hurts my heart for those children. It also hurts my heart for Sam and his family.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts my heart, the people who had romantic relationships with Arzwaga, because likely there were criminal offenses that were occurring when Child Protective Services was coming out. If they had done their fucking job.
Yeah, the only thing they're supposed to be doing.
Literally their number one fucking priority. Those children would not have suffered abuse and would not have had to be a part of the horrific things that happened to Sam.
Yeah.
But it's also completely possible she wouldn't have been free in the world to have hurt Sam.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, not only just CPS, but there are 300 plus police reports about her.
Exactly.
How many does it fucking take?
How many does it take? And so Des said that Arzwaga controlled her just generally, but even the way she did her hair, the clothing she wore, and when she would use her phone. Des and Arzwaga broke up in April of 2024, which is just a few months before Sam and Arzwaga got together.
So Christina Gonzalez is another person that Syracuse.com spoke with. And they had known Arzwaga since they were in elementary school and said that Arzwaga picks people that she thinks are weaker purposefully.
Everything about this case is heartbreaking, right? And nobody deserves to be generally hurt or hurt by somebody who they love. But one of the things that I find especially heartbreaking is that this is the relationship that Sam got into directly after having been in another abusive relationship.
It shouldn't happen to Sam. It shouldn't happen to anyone. And the thing that just gets me is 300 fucking police reports. Like, I don't know at what point then. Like, what do you have to do to get people put away? Like,
exactly.
Truly, I don't know. I don't know if 300 police reports aren't enough, then there's nothing.
And what's very interesting is, I believe it's the police chief from like their days of being like I think they called him like a beat cop.
Okay.
He recognized her name. He was like, oh, I know who that is. Because he was used to like being called out to Patty's Lodge to like see what fresh fucking horrors Arzwaga was into.
So another person who knows Arzwaga and her family told Syracuse.com that the day that Sam had died, Arzwaga was panicked and went for help. She then said to the person that she went to for help, quote, "We went too far this time. This time." What?
This time. It's also not all the other times. There was a final event at some point, presumably on February 2nd when the torture ended.
Yeah.
It was because Sam died. They didn't think that they went too far every single day before that.
For a month?
This is the only place where we saw this "we went too far" statement. We don't 100% know that that was said, but it is something that was reported. So we wanted to share it.
Right. Another person we're going to discuss is Jennifer Quijano. And she was not interviewed by Syracuse.com, but she was discussed in the reporting. So per Syracuse.com, Quijano allegedly cannot read or write and has suffered extreme abuse. She too had been in a romantic relationship with Arzwaga. Before her relationship with Arzwaga, she had been abused by a previous long-term partner. Sources told Syracuse.com that Quijano had been kept in a basement for years. This case, man, just so much.
So clearly, like, it does not excuse what Quijano did, but she is also a victim of abuse.
Yes.
You don't get to hurt people because you were hurt, but it is
Yeah.
still very sad.
It seems that Quijano and Arzwaga may have lived together at times, and during these periods, Arzwaga would kick her out of their home. Just to note, Quijano is also facing new charges for second-degree assault as of August of 2025. She attacked another inmate and struck them in the face and head. The attack against the other inmate resulted in physical injury. So it wasn't like a quick squabble. It was like,
Yeah, there was damage done. Yeah.
yeah. So now that we've talked a lot about some of these people and just knowing their backgrounds a bit more, let's talk about some of the case updates happening. The judge on the case ordered DNA swabs from all of the defendants. The assistant county attorney specified that the DNA samples that were collected from the scene had multiple contributors. She notes that the samples with multiple contributors cannot be run into CODIS, and they have to be run against specific individuals.
I never realized that if you have a sample that has multiple DNA profiles, they couldn't just run it through CODIS and like look for the different profiles,
Yeah.
that it had to be like, you run it against these particular people. That feels like maybe they need to update CODIS.
Now, there's been a few miscellaneous hearings. All defendants appeared in a hearing to determine some case details. This was a motions hearing. All the defense attorneys tried to have the case severed, but that was deemed to be premature.
We talked about with Mercedes' case that 3 trials would be a very intense fiscal burden for the state. But can you imagine 7 separate trials?
That's wild. Yeah, and
Mhm.
think about Sam's family doesn't live in that state. You know, like all the travel that everyone would have to do and just horrible. They also discussed discovery. Assistant District Attorney Victoria Porter said that evidence is being handed over as soon as it's possible. Arzwaga's counsel filed for a change in venue because they argued that she wouldn't have a fair trial because of publicity. Does that sound familiar?
Boy, does it.
The prosecution said that since the case made national news, the change in venue would not make it more fair. Prosecutors have shared that there's a lot of body cam footage from law enforcement that documents their encounters with witnesses and suspects that is still being reviewed. They are going to continue to gather evidence from this footage, and if possible, it will likely be used as evidence. First Assistant District Attorney Kelly Walford said, quote, "I will say that nothing that we've uncovered during the course of this investigation has mitigated any of the horribleness of what we saw at the beginning, as we still continue to uncover evidence on a daily basis that is shocking." That's pretty bad.
Just a moment ago, Amanda said they'll use that evidence, if possible, from that body cam footage. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's been a little while since you've had lawyer Lindsay, but I'm here now. And let's talk about Huntley hearings, which I actually didn't really know a lot about until we were looking at this, because this is, from my understanding, a New York jurisdiction specialty here. The hearings for this were held in late August and early September of 2025. They're on different days because I think they had about 2 people per day typically. So we're going to kind of lump them as they were. But first, let's talk about what a Huntley hearing is. The purpose of a Huntley hearing is to give the defendant the option to challenge whether a statement made to law enforcement was voluntary and lawful. And they're only going to do that if the prosecution intends to use that statement at trial. So let's say, for example, it's a jam cat that has been arrested for stealing jam. And on the body cam footage, it is very clear that jam cat says, "Oh my gosh, I just love jam so fucking much. How could I not?" They just kind of blurt it out. And it's after they receive their Miranda rights. And the prosecution wants to use that statement at trial. If it was in New York, they'd have a Huntley hearing. to figure out whether it should be included, because they're going to ask, was it voluntary? Did the person make the statement of their own volition without unfair coercion, like a police officer threatening violence or making some type of false promise? Like, oh, if you tell us, it's not a big deal. We're not going to do anything. There'll be no charges, no worries. We're just having a conversation. That might be considered a non-voluntary statement if you're making it based on that conversation. So they're going to consider that, whether it was voluntary, but also whether it was lawful. And when we're looking at whether it's lawful, we're looking at whether the defendant was in custody or whether if they were simply being questioned. If a defendant is simply being questioned, they are free to leave at any time. They do not have to answer questions. They can simply leave. They can say, okay, have I been arrested? Am I being charged with something? Am I in custody? And if the answer is no, you get to leave. If the answer is yes, then you should have received your Miranda rights. So you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. We've all heard it in any type of crime drama, right? Did you receive your Miranda rights? And did you waive them? Waiving can be as simple as they say that, you acknowledge it. This is jurisdictionally based, but the waiver of Miranda rights could be as simple as continuing to speak after you've confirmed you've heard those rights. Sometimes they'll have you sign a waiver. But the judge is going to look at that. They're going to say, was it voluntary and was it lawful? Now, if the judge determines that the statement was voluntary and lawful, then that statement or confession can be used by the prosecution at trial. But what if the statement was voluntary, but it wasn't lawful? So the person said it of their own free will, but they hadn't received their Miranda rights, or they thought that they were in custody, but they weren't. What happens then? If that's what the judge determines, voluntary but not lawful, that means that the prosecution basically can't bring it up. If that jam cat gets on the stand and goes, I don't even like jam. I have never said I like jam. Everyone knows I don't like jam. Then the prosecution can use that statement to impeach that defendant's testimony. They can say, hey, actually, we have a statement where you literally said the opposite. We have footage of you saying literally this. So they can't bring it up, but they can use it to prove that you're lying. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of a Huntley hearing, is to figure out what of those statements can be used. We couldn't find any footage of the hearing, so we're relying on news articles and news footage of these hearings. So there's bits and pieces available of each, so we're going to kind of go through each one. Thomas Eves and Kyle Sages, theirs was on the same day. Their defense argued that one of the witnesses should be excluded because they weren't listed as being on that hearing and that there was a typo on his body cam footage. And the prosecution was like, actually, we don't have to provide you a list of witnesses prior. And it was a typo, so it was corrected and verified with an affidavit. Then, for Emily Moika and Patrick Goodwin, one of the statements at issue for Moika was said to a police officer who approached her after Sam's body had been found. In the footage, Moika said she was nervous. And then she said that with everything going on, I feel horrible and I don't know what's going on. Moika's counsel argued that the state police didn't ask how long she had been awake before questioning her.
Okay.
And bringing her back to the trooper barracks where her Miranda rights were read, which I've just never heard sleepiness as a defense before.
Right? You're too tired to answer a question.
She hadn't had her coffee. Like, that feels like a stretch. And then Goodwin's attorney argued that the lead investigator offered Goodwin amnesty without approval from the district attorney. Perhaps they were making a false promise there. And the prosecution argued that the body cam footage / audio recordings show that they were not in custody and that they could have left at any point. The last set of Huntley hearings were for Azuaga and Kimberly Socha. We're mostly going to talk about Azuaga because we actually have this very vivid image of how she was arrested and what that looked like. So let's start there. 2 corrections officers and 2 state troopers who had interactions with Arzuaga took the stand during this hearing. Arzuaga's defense attorney argued that Arzuaga's statements that were made during the welfare check on Sam should not be used as evidence because they were from prior to Arzuaga's arrest. Her attorney also questioned whether body cam footage from corrections officers who worked within the jail should be admissible because Arzuaga was clearly experiencing a mental health crisis. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, investigator Brian Hotchkiss, who also arrested Arzuaga from her mother's house, testified about that day and how the arrest had happened. Hotchkiss testified that the day prior to the arrest, he had questioned Arzuaga at her mother's home. The next day, when Sam's body was found, they came back to serve a search warrant and to arrest Arzuaga. they had to break down her mother's door in order to get Arzuaga. And when they came in, there was a mattress on the floor in the front room, and Arzuaga was sitting on it. She was the 6th person to be arrested. So there was 5 people who'd already been arrested, and the barracks were full. So she had to be kept in an interview room before she was transferred to the jail. Once in jail, that's when they believe that she may have had her mental health crisis because she was crying and pacing in her cell. 2 of the Ontario County Jail corrections officers testified and said that they saw her doing this. They asked if she was okay, and she volunteered information about her involvement in Sam's death. The statements of what she exactly said were not disclosed during the hearing, which I feel is appropriate. They were just figuring out, like, should you be able to use any of that? If you're going to talk to a corrections officer after you've been arrested, I feel like that should be admissible. But
right, you already read your rights. You're in a situation you could have just told them, I'm not speaking with you. But, like, you're unloading information. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to Socha, she was pregnant at the time of her questioning, and she originally denied any involvement in Sam's disappearance. Then she changed her mind and wrote a statement about what she had seen. Investigators read that statement back to her, and she began crying and said she was going to throw up, so they got her a trash can. And Socha actually gave birth to her child while she's been in jail. We haven't seen the outcomes of the hearings, but it appears that for Arzuaga alone, all of her statements except those made at the jail will be admissible, which I feel like is a little bit disappointing, but I think they probably have enough.
I think so too. 300 police reports seems like they should be able to find enough information that is connected to this enough that they could use it. There's a pattern of abuse here, and it's documented that Sam was trying to leave her shortly before this. It's pretty consistent with all of the other people that have come forward. Honestly, there's probably more.
Yeah.
Just going off of this pattern of abuse and horrificness, it hurts my heart for everyone that's come in contact with her. So let's transition from these evil people. We talked about what happened to Sam, and like thinking about it is just, it's one of the worst things that we've talked about in our case. Like there's been some horrific bad ones.
Yes.
This is another level, but
yeah,
let's talk about some good and his family and how they're honoring Sam. Sam's name was added to the National LGBTQ+ Wall of Honor at Stonewall Inn. His mother, Linda, and his sister, Kayla, came to the ceremony. And from everything that we've seen about Sam, he was just such a kind human. He worked with his mom, and they were very, very close. He also was pretty close with his siblings as well, and his nieces and nephews. So just like a family person, right?
Yeah. And also like just a love bug. He seemed like a love bug.
The family had a tradition that Sam spent Halloween with his nieces and nephews, and they revised their tradition last year to spend some time at the cemetery so they could include him in their tradition still.
We heard this from an interview with Linda, and she was like, we're updating our traditions. And it was like, you think about losing someone, it's horrible. And I can't imagine how his family feels because I haven't lost someone in this way.
Yeah.
Most of us have lost someone, and you have that first time that you encounter the tradition without them.
Yeah.
And I think it was beautiful that she was like, we are going to include him, because the only thing worse than, like, sometimes you do the same tradition, right? Because you're like, okay, this is what we do.
That's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. But we do it with Sam. It's not just the tradition. It's a tradition with Sam.
Yeah.
And that they were like, we're moving forward, but he's still here in the way, the best way that they can. I thought that was really lovely.
It is.
Ugh, crying, man.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
It is a hard one.
So those are our 3 updates for today. And we hope to see more justice for all of these individuals and everyone we've covered. As always, we'll share more updates in future True Crime Digests, but we also do share updates on our social media as well. If there's cases that you'd like us to cover and we haven't already included them in our True Crime Digest, please feel free to let us know. Same thing goes for if there's someone that you know that needs a little bit of help with a case. We've been tagged in things before, and we're happy to help where we can.
Yeah. And with that, have a great weekend.
Thanks for creeping with us.
Thanks for listening. And as always, a special thank you to our patrons who support us via Patreon.
Please see the link in our show notes to learn more about how you, yes you, can begin to haunt the dump, guard vortexes, or even become a scorching Sasquatch.
Ooh. Also in our show notes, you can find the link to our website, more information on our sources, our social media handles, and our merch store.
We'd love for you to keep creeping with us. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with your fellow creeps and or ghosts.
I beg of you.